Welcome to this Sunday's Gospel Reflection. Well, every day huge amounts of food are thrown away as supermarkets offload produce that has passed its best before date. Restaurants, cafes, bakeries every day dispose of uneaten meals and foods for similar reasons. Now, an app exists which is called Too Good to Go, is reducing all this waste. The app offers users access to unsold, safe to eat produce from participating suppliers. The food is heavily discounted, a third of the regular price. Too Good to Go has now been downloaded by 22 million people in Europe, and users can see which outlets in their neighborhood have surplus food available on that day, and then they can go and pick it up at closing time. An estimated 100,000 cheap meals a day feed needy people, whilst helping to mitigate climate change by avoiding all that waste. This shows how together we can fight waste. Isn't this a wonderful piece of good news? Isn't it marvelous that instead of being thrown away as waste, so much food keeps so many people alive? Isn't this also the good news that Jesus came to proclaim to the poor? No life should go to waste. No human person should end up in the dustbin of life. Each and every person is too good to go, to be thrown away. At first sight, the story of Jonah and the big fish, a popular story with little children, seems to be saying the opposite. God called Jonah and asked him to go and proclaim to the sinful Nineveh that the reckoning was round the corner, and in 3 days' time the city and its inhabitants would be mercilessly destroyed, wasted. Jonah was terrified by this mission. He saw this as a doomed and hopeless mission. He was sure that the perverted, corrupt, sinful people of Nineveh, like so many of our cities, will not only ridicule and dismiss his preaching, but will also turn on him and kill him for proclaiming this bad news. So he decided to run away from God and from his mission, quickly boarded a boat to take him as far away as possible from the land that is doomed, together with the sinners. And it took God's direct intervention to have him swallowed by a fish that would spit him onto the land he refused to go to, forcing him to proclaim what he saw as useless warnings. He was convinced the people were too far gone in their sinfulness for there to be any hope for them. Do you recognize the feeling? When we see so much evil around us in this world, when opening the news, on TV and papers, you don't seem to find anything except disasters and cruelties and injustices. But Jonah, running away from his mission, offers a stark contrast to Jesus. He too was entrusted with announcing a warning and an invitation to the people. He too was asked to call them to repent, like John, his predecessor. Like Jonah, Jesus also too knew full well how hard-headed his listeners will prove to be. He too knew too well that his preaching would seem too challenging and subversive and unsettling for people who are settled in their sinful ways, especially people in any kind of power. He too could see how his preaching would fall on so many deaf ears, and he knew full well that this proclamation of his would make many enemies, that he would be persecuted and killed for proclaiming the truth. Yet he did not run away from his mission like Jonah did. He loved us, his brothers and sisters, too much to give up on us. He kept believing that somehow, sometime, we will find a slight crack is opening in our hard shell of sin and selfishness to let in the radiant light of God's tender love for us. And deep inside that dark and hardened shell, we will find that there is a little seed of love and life waiting for someone to shine on it his loving and life-giving eyes. Jesus believed in us. Jesus looked at us, and in his heart he pitied us but loved us and said, "No, these people are too good to go. They are too good to be wasted." It was his loving eyes that could see a lover in the adulterous sinner. It was Jesus' loving eyes that could see generosity in Zacchaeus' avaricious heart. That he could see genuine love in Peter's weak and treacherous denials. To Jonah's surprise, the people did respond to the loving eyes of God. And he knew that deep inside them there was long suppressed and a flickering spark of love and of life that were deeply buried under layer upon layer of generations of sinners. He wanted to shout the good news to them. And the good news was, because you're my beloved children, you too can love one another as I have loved you. I know it, and I have always known it. With God, no one runs the risk of being treated as useless trash. Not even the most depraved sinners is considered as a hopeless loss. God the Father will always recognize the image of his Son in every man, every woman, every child. However used, abused, or misused, this image of God in us will always shine through the layers of human dirt that accumulates in every person because of all the hurt that has accumulated in his or her heart. What a challenge it is for us humans, especially for those among us who take pride in their own righteousness. What a challenge it is to see in others, even in the midst of their real miseries, mistakes, and crimes, as persons who are too good to go, rather than being just scum that should be thrown away into the dustbin of life. They see in them sparks of love that have been smothered and covered and buried for far too long by the miseries of life. If only our so-called progressive societies helped us to be as ecological sensitive with people as we pretend to be ecological sensitive with nature and the planet. Ah, then we would taste the sweetness of real progress, when no unborn baby would end up in the abortionist dustbin as just waste or a thrown away garbage. No, no suffering or fragile, sick, or elderly person would be eliminated just because pain is garbage and palliative care is sheer economic waste. It's useless waste of money and resources for our societies who pretend to be so progressive. Even capital punishment will be abolished and no criminal will be condemned to death because society loves to dress up pure revenge with a dress of self-righteous justice. No, every human being, however wicked or evil he may seem, is too good to go in God's loving eyes. This is the good news that Jesus came not just to announce, but to pay the price for. He proclaimed this good news not just in the marketplace or from the mountaintops. He proclaimed the good news perched and nailed to a cross with two criminal, sinner, thieves as companions. Because these companions were on the cross because as criminals they were not good enough to remain among the living. Even then, the criminal sinner, the thieves, made different choices. One insisted on getting something out of Jesus. If you're the Son of God, get me down from here. The other criminal made the last minute but life-saving decision. The spark of goodness within him that had been downtrodden for far too long could now recognize the Prince of Goodness itself and fall in love with him. Remember me when you enter the kingdom. Didn't ask to be liberated, to be freed, to be saved from that. Remember me. Keep me in your heart. The first criminal died in his blindness. The second found life in his conversion. Today, you will be with me in God's kingdom. Yes, all of us, each one of us, is too good to go. But our goodness and preciousness cannot be taken for granted. It is really ours when we accept, embrace, and choose it. When all is said and done, everything depends on our own free choice. Yes, some choose to embrace the goodness within them. Others insist on refusing it. The people of Nineveh chose to embrace it and lived. Will the people of God, even today, make the same choice? Thank you and God bless you.